welcome to the channel. Thank you everyone for tuning in. On today's video, guys, I've got a new watch brand that I've never seen before in my life, and we are going to be reviewing one of their models. Now, I reached out to this brand after I saw a couple of advertisements on Instagram, and in messages they were really pleasant, they were quite responsive, and I wanted a particular model that they do and what I saw on the Instagram ad. Now, unfortunately, they couldn't give me that model just now, but they did opt to send me a different model, which you can see that I'm unboxing in front of you guys. It's a dress watch. It's from a line of watches that they do, and this brand, honestly, I've never seen it before and I don't know why, but when I went on their website, they have got such a diverse brand. They've got so many different styles, and I gotta say, I am excited by this brand. They offer such a variety, such a rich diversity in their designs and styles. I mean, they use anything from Japanese quartz all the way up to high-end Swiss movement, so they've got quite a variety in price as well. So after this initial introduction and introducing the watch to you, I'll take you over to the website. I like to do this every time I feature a new brand because it's new to me. It's also helpful to anybody else knowing just a bit more than the particular watch that we're looking at. So we will do that segment a little bit later on, and I'll take you through so many things that they do. And there is so many watches that I've seen now from this brand, which I'm so interested in, and I really love what they do. They've got a really high-end quality of finish. They feature complications and very classical designs as well. So allow me to show you the particular model that we have today, what we're looking at. Now, this is from one of the, I think, 4 or 5 ranges. This is the initial range, and this is called the initial day night. Now, this initial day night has a number of complications. It's an automatic watch. It's got, your standard specifications that you expect. So a sapphire crystal. It's only got around 30 meters of water resistance because it is a dress watch, and that's more than adequate. A stainless steel case, screw down case back. It's got a push-pull crown. The watch uses the automatic Miyota 9132 high beat movement, which you've seen so many different watches, but this is a different complication. As you can see, it's got a power reserve. It's also got a date-night indicator as well as a date. The movement is a high beat movement, and as I said, the specs are pretty standard. That the price of this is around 650 euros, so it's not cheap, and it's not overly expensive. It sits in the mid-range. Now, in terms of dimensions, you've got a 40mm case, you've got a 13mm thickness, a very compact lug-to-lug of 45mm, a lug width of 20mm, and overall, yeah, I think the watch so far, it's got some really nice and elegant features, which I can see. It's got a really pleasant aesthetic, but we're going to dig deeper into that, of course. Now, the watch, as you can see, comes on this really supple leather strap. The leather strap, I can tell already, it's a very high grade. You've got this sort of semi-aniline leather, really nice to the touch, soft, smells like leather as well. You've got some contrast stitching, and yeah, this doesn't need to be worn in that much because it's already supple as it is. You've got your branding on the back as well, quick release bars. Does it have any signage? It has no real signage. I think that's just something else, but no signage on the buckle. So with that being said, I think dimensionally, as it is a dress watch, the first point that we need to address is, of course, the thickness. This is way too thick for a dress watch. Now, at this point, I want to take you across to the website and we'll look at this initial range because they've got a lot more versions to this, and they actually vary in movement and design and also thickness. What I want to say at this point is that with this particular movement, and if you opted for this particular design, you really have to accept the thickness because of the complications. I think that's what's added to the thickness. If you take a look at the case back, the movement is sitting pretty close to the case back. It's also been signed by Charlie Paris on the rotor, and it does feature, Miyota's general sort of decoration on the back. Now, I'd say, bearing that in mind, this is why this watch is 13mm thick. And later on, when I show you a wrist shot, we'll see if it actually does work. But if you wanted something thinner in this initial range, let's go ahead and let's check out the website and all that Charlie have to offer. So here we are on the website to Charlie Paris, and this is the initial range, as I said. So you can see all these different versions, right? You've got an open heart skeleton movement, 40mm in diameter, as is the one I have in hand. Movement wise, you've got a Miyota S7, which is a lower beat, 40-hour power reserve, but it also has the open heart. So these guys prefer using Miyota over Seiko. Now, I think the thickness, let's have a look at this, because with these dress watches, the thickness is a major part of it. So that's just 12mm thick, which I'd say is a bit thick for a dress watch. Now, looking at something a bit slimmer, so this is something just a lot more simpler, a lot more fitting to that, pure dress watch aesthetic, and this runs the Miyota 9015, and you've got a thickness of just 10.2 millimeters, so that's very much in line. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out is because, rather than slate the current model I have, which is the day night, for being overly thick, I feel we have to understand why it is that thick, and that's because of the features present. So you really have to choose what you want. So because I didn't have a choice in this is the watch they sent me, so this is what I've got to review. So if you are after a dress watch from Charlie Paris and you want it to be a lot thinner, then you do have a slim version to go for. If you wanted just a few more complications, something a bit more to look at, then 13 mil, that is what you'll have to deal with. Now, looking at the prices, I mean, they're around 645 euros, but they start at around 400 euros. So for the slim one, and these are, I think, as basic as it gets. This is the basic line, where the cases are rather simple, but that's not what I want to show you guys. I want to show you something else as well. And what actually stood out to me was this particular version. This is called the Concordia, and this line of watches, this is like the dive watches, or let's say the sports watches, and they really stood out. They look stunning. If you take a quick look at some of these, and they start out around 300 euros, and this is with a Seiko Quartz VH31 movement. And guys always say they don't see these movements enough from actual brands or micro brands, but here we go. Charlie Paris have gone for this. And they also offer that in a steel version for was it 245 euros, which I'd say is reasonable. And the reason I say it is, if we take a look at just some of these pictures, I mean, it looks really well made. Right, 200 meters of water resistance, your Seiko VH31 quartz, a rather nice looking bracelet. So this is the automatic version. So let's go on. So this is called the Concordia. You also got a Concordia Dune Mark II, which looks really nice. But the ones that do it for me is, of course, the automatic divers. So if we take a look at this automatic Dune with a very thin dive watch bezel, just check that out, guys. You've got the Fume brand dial. And I'm liking these Fume brand dials. A very bespoke kind of crown with like an aluminium insert, and this is actually using the Swiss Soprod P024 caliber. Yeah, so that's really good, and that's the one I actually want. So hopefully Charlie have a look at this review and they think, I've done a good enough job as a reviewer, right? Not necessarily giving you guys a positive opinion of them, just calling as I see it, that hopefully they'll give me another one. So then they've also got a GMT as well, which looks fantastic. It's got a textured dial, it's like some scratched up dial there. So the green looks quite good. And then this lovely brown GMT. So yeah, a lot of variety from these guys, and I think they high, and these go up to around 1,300 euros, 1,400 euros. But they do also have a sort of high end range called Alliance. Now these watches look really good, and I mean they are around 2,000 euros, 1,500 euros, around that price. But if we just take a look at least the pictures, right? You've got your, I think, is that a moon complication? You've got a sub dial at the bottom. If you take a look at this rather basic or simple one, just look at the finishing on the case. It looks extremely high end. The handset looks awesome, and this is actually got let's have a look, the La Joux Perret manufacturer movement. It's a hand winding G100 with a crazy 68 hours of power reserve, and it looks nice as well, right? You've got some nice decoration on there, and yeah, they seem to be pretty high end, and I particularly like the Alliance and of course the Concordia. So these two watches I'll be aiming to get for, but right now we have to just stick with the initial one. So back to the watch I have in hand from Charlie, and this is the chocolate brown day night edition. Now, as you saw on the website, it's not there, it's not available, which I think is a shame, because this is such a nice color, and the best way to describe it is a very dark chocolate sort of hue on the dial. It is a very dark brown, and in some cases it does look like black under some lighting. And the thing with this is also got rose gold accents, which do really complement it, so it does look like a really beautiful watch. So as you guys saw, with the variants that have with this initial series, you wanted this particular setup on the dial. That's what basically made you choose it. So there isn't a lot I can criticize on the design side of it. So in terms of busyness and what a dress watch should be, because they have other options, this is for the person that actually wants this dial setup and complication. So therefore, it's laid out really well. So you've got your power reserve at the 12, and it is nice, it is balanced. It actually curves around the indicator, so you can see the way the text curves. It actually goes from the 11 o'clock index to the 1 o'clock index, just to give you some sort of shape out of that, I suppose. Then you've got your logo to your left of the dial, and it's possibly a stork flying, polished, and you got your white text printed. And you also got a date wheel to your right at the 3 o'clock. Now notice the date wheel is actually all the way in front of the hour marker, just so not to cut out the hour marker. Now again, some may say that the date window is a little too far in, but I think, as I said, with so many different options available, and for you to choose this, it's because you're happy with the layout. So with the complications on display, I think they've done reasonably well. They've spread them out across the dial. Of course, you have your date night disc in the center, with a nicely brushed screw holding it down. So it's present, it's done, it's there, and I think they've done the most they could with the dial in terms of laying everything out, and also to not make it look overly busy. And you've got that balance between minimalistic and complications present on the dial. If you take a look at the hour markers, they're just polished slithers applied to the dial. Very basic chaptering also. Now the standout feature for me on this watch is, of course, the handset. These are spear style hands, perfectly polished, beveled, but what that does mean, though, unfortunately, that is head on, and under certain lighting conditions the handset does totally disappear, but all you see is like the power reserve as well as the date logo, and of course that disc in the center. Now some may like that as an aesthetic, but what I find is that the watch has to be at an angle so you can always see the hands. If it goes just head on towards a direct source of light, those hands do disappear. But under that light, everything does look really well polished, really elegant, and I like that dial because it does have a very slight texture similar to very fine leather. So that texture isn't overly grainy, it's got a very fine grain, and that dark, very dark chocolate dial does look nice against the brighter accents visible on the watch. Now something else you'll notice about this watch is that the bezel is minimal on the watch. It's very, very slim, and it just gives you a rim to the case, and that allows for kind of maximum visibility of the dial, and I think they had to do that to get the complications present. When you turn the watch to its side, then you can have a look at the bezel. It has an extremely steep slope, and as I said, it's on the side of the watch case, fully polished. As it is a dress watch, the whole watch is actually fully polished. There's no getting away from that. It's going to be a fingerprint magnet, but the polishing does mean that the case is very smooth, very slick in hand. Of course, it's going to pick up scratches, but again, being a dress watch and having these particular complications, I suppose it's not for daily wear. Now, one thing nice about the dimensions is the extremely compact lug to lug. I think they've balanced that 40mm diameter with these very short lugs, so you don't actually see the lugs much at all. And what that does mean, it's going to, or it should fit really well on a smaller wrist. The lugs do have a rather steep slope, and I said fully polished, with a 20mm lug width. On this really soft strap, I think it looks really nice. Now, of course, if you went for the white dial or the blue dial, you'd get color matched straps. But for the most part, this watch, the more you look at it, the more you can appreciate some of the finer features. So on wrist, the initial day-night does wear really well. I really like how it sits. That 40mm diameter is exactly what you need to be able to see these complications, to be able to get just a wide surface area. And what really helps this watch wear extremely well, there's two things. One thing is, of course, the compact lug to lug, 45.5mm is absolutely perfect for a 6.5-inch wrist. If not a bit bigger or a bit smaller, it'll definitely work. As you can see, it sits well within the wrist. It sits pretty tight against the wrist as well. And the second thing which really helps that is that semi-aniline, super soft leather strap. No need to wear it in, as it is pretty supple from the get-go. Now, the problem is that 13mm thickness, there is no getting away from that, because the case does kind of downturn underneath, but you do have that case back sitting there, and you can see how the watch sits on the wrist. So if you're looking for that dress watch that slips under the cuff, you will struggle with this one. But as I said, because of the variants available, if you wanted a thinner, more simpler dress watch, then they have that option available for the same price. But the reason you're getting this is because you want the dial aesthetic, the setup that they have given you here. So yeah, that does look really nice, and it wears okay, And I'm not a huge fan of dress watches. I do have a couple in my collection, but this does look really nice. I like the aesthetics. Now, pros and cons. Is it all great? Is it a 10/10 watch, or is there anything that can be made better, or is a bit of an issue? So I think, for one, I think the date wheel does stand out rather a lot. It would have been nice if it was black and maybe with a rose gold accent. Or I know it's difficult to probably get the exact color match because this is quite a unique color. Now, that again is quite subjective because the date complication is there. The other thing is that disc. That disc stands out far too much for me. And when you turn the watch on its side, it does look like a problem. The disc is not level. There's a bigger gap on one side than the other, so it does look like it is tilted. And I think that's a big no-no. What I think would have been better is if that disc was actually subset into the dial or into that sort of raised rim, which you can see, and then that would have added just another level of quality or build quality and maybe some more elegance, and I think it would have looked right. That for me does look off. It's like a floating disc, but it's not quite set right, so it's just like bad workmanship in my opinion. So I think that could be way better if it was just kind of pressed in. It would have looked a lot better, a bit more uniform, and it would have given it a premium look to that dial. I think aside from that, and I like everything else that they've done, and using all these complications from an auto, it does give the watch a much sort of higher regard, if that makes sense. Because if you look at like the Patek Philippe's and you look at the watches with more complications in autos, they're not always thin, and it does really give you that appearance of this watch is a lot more expensive than it should be. So let me know your thoughts on this watch, guys. Let me know what you think. Is there anything you agree with or disagree with? Let's see what you guys have to say. So as always, thank you all for watching, and I will see you on the next video.